friends, welcome to Hip Hooray, our virtual class on putting together a 2-page birthday spread. I'm Andrea Deer with the whole kit and caboodle, and along this class, I'm going to teach you not only how to assemble this 2-page kit, but I'm also going to give you ideas on how to purchase the kit and the cardstock coordinating pack and turn those 2 pages into 4 pages. We include so many die cuts in our kits, it's easily converted to multiple pages. I'm also going to show you how to use this birthday overlay in different ways. So our theme that we're going to do today is very bright and primary colors, but I'm going to show you how to use that cake overlay on a more kind of soft birthday page and on a wedding page. So go grab your kits and we're going to get started with this side of the spread. I actually started with a white solid piece as the background. So in your packet of goodies, let's set that aside. I need you to pull out the white cardstock. Now flip it over to make sure that there's not a barcode. Sometimes there are barcodes on all of the cardstock, so you want to make sure that you're really starting with a 12 by 12 because we are going to totally fill this page. And if you would forget to cut off that little barcode strip, you could end up with a page that wouldn't fit into your album. So always, when we give you solids that are used for the background, make sure that you're always checking to make sure they are true 12 by 12 with that barcode cut off. All right, so I'm going to leave the actual sample here so that you can see as we start to layer this one along, you can see where it's going to go in the end. All right, but the first step there is to make sure you start off with that 12 by 12 white cardstock. All right, also in your packet, you have a piece of yellow star pattern paper. So it's shooting stars. This actually came from a little boy collection, so it's not birthday themed at all. If you look on the back, that's actually kind of fun too. But I love kind of a more subdued background. This would be monochromatic, tone on tone, which just tends to be kind of my way of starting with the background sheet. So with this 12 by 12 yellow pattern paper, we are going to cut it to 11.5 by 11 3/4. Okay, so 11.5 by 11 3/4. So make sure you have that correct because this does have a direction. So if you cut it wrong, it will appear that your shooting stars are going up and down versus side to side. Will it make a difference in the end? Not likely, but if you want it exact to the sample, you want to make sure that your 11.5 inches and your 11 3/4 inches. All right, makes sense? All right, let's go ahead and get that cut. I am going to start by cutting the 11 3/4 and then cutting the 11.5. And then you should notice that it will fit perfectly snug to that bottom edge and it will have an equal border of white showing all the way around. Now, I always suggest that if you are a fan of particular pattern paper, make sure that you save that barcode strip. That will tell you not only the manufacturer's name, but the collection that it came from and the exact name of that pattern paper. Like I said, we're going to easily convert this if you get the extra coordinating pack. You would be able to convert that in its entirety to 4 pages. But if you purchase the paper pack as well, you can make an entire album and add very few die cuts along the way. Again, because we always pack them full of die cuts. That's one of the fun aspects of creating, and with the Cricuts that came out, what, 10 years ago now, anything that's up here, we can cut in paper. All right, so let's go ahead and glue this spot here. I'm gonna run my adhesive all the way around. For large pieces like this, I always use the ATG gun. I love that the roll lasts for such a long time. And I'm not constantly refilling that when I do it the correct way. All right. So I'm going to line that up flush at the bottom. So again, you should see you have an exact border of the white showing on the left, at the top, and on the right, because we are flush to the bottom edge, all the way aligned to the bottom edge there. All right, once that piece is done, also in your bag, you have this yellow piece with crowns on top of it. To me, it would be like the birthday queen or the birthday king. I thought that was a fun little thing. And it's actually from a different collection pack as well. If I remember right, it's from a little girl princess kind of collection. I always say don't judge a book by its collection pack cover, right? Um, so this happy birthday is very gender neutral. I feel that you can put female, male, they could be young, they could be 8, they could be 58, and I think this would all still work well. So don't dismiss a girl pattern paper if your page is for a boy, because you never know what's going to work. All right, so we're actually going to cut this into 2 pieces. So we're going to use a piece of it for our left page. And then once that's done, we'll also use that little piece extra that we're cutting, and we're going to use that for the right page. But we're going to go ahead and cut both pieces now since we already have it out. We're going to go ahead and cut the pieces for both sides of that spread. All right, so the first cut I want you to do is 8.5. 8.5. So then you'll have a 6 by 8.5 piece, just like so. And then what's left over there is should be 6 and 3.5. I'm just going to double check, and it sure is. So that extra piece that's left over is 6 by 3.5. So I'm going to set that aside because we're not going to use that piece on this page, but we'll definitely need it for the next page. We're going to take that larger piece here, and we're going to adhere it in this bottom left corner. So the bottom left corner. You get this a little closer to you. I know it seems like, why would you do 2 different monochromatic yellow pieces on top of each other, right? But look at the little visual interest it creates by our title. So while I love this background, you'll notice that our crown piece is just a little lighter. So there's just enough difference in the tones that it helps draw our eye down to the bottom portion of this page here. That, and I love pattern paper, and I can't stop myself from picking out more and more and more and more. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and run my adhesive. And we're going to adhere that again in this lower left corner. Like so. So see, you can really see the stark difference here. Even though they are both yellow monochromatic patterns, the base of our big one is dark and the base of our smaller one is lighter. So it really, again, helps create that visual interest, even though they're both tone on tone. All right, so on to step number 4. In your packet, you have a 1 by 12 piece of striped paper. Should look just like this. We're going to cut that off to 11 3/4. All right, because in the end, if you look here at our sample, we want to put it down the right side of that page, but we don't want it to go all the way to the top. We only want it to match that yellow background. So we're going to cut that down to 11 3/4. So basically just taking off 1/4 of an inch, right? And then we're going to adhere that piece. And we're going to leave just a tiny little border of that yellow background showing on the right side there. So once you have that cut, go ahead and run your adhesive. And let's get that one in place. All right. We are actually getting ready to celebrate my dad's birthday here really soon. So, believe it or not, my dad and his birthday in a couple weeks will only be 73 years old. Isn't that crazy? He just seems so young, right? He probably doesn't feel young, but I remember thinking that 70 would be so old, and nowadays it's still young and spry. But my dad's only going to be 73 here soon. All right. Yes, he was just a baby when I was born. All right. So now that we have that striped paper down, also in your packet, you have a piece of blue chipped pattern paper. All right. So this is from that birthday pack. See how fun that is? This would be a great, if you ever get in a pinch and you want to design some pages on your own using your die cutting system, and you're like, I don't even know where to begin to layer pieces together. Sometimes if you look at pattern papers, it's just the inspiration you need, because look at the background of this pattern paper. So you could create one of these little balloon clusters using your own die cutting machine, right? So this one would be super easy, where we're taking just the exact same size and shape of a balloon, and just cutting it out in various different colors and bundling them together. It also shows the fun option if you want one of those balloons to be a rainbow or a star or maybe a happy face. But wouldn't that be so fun as a cluster of die cuts on your page? Love it. I always get inspiration from the paper itself. All right, so just like what we did with this striped paper, again, if you look at our final sample, we don't want our blue to go all the way to the top of the page. We only want it to go to the top of the yellow. And that's because I wanted everything contained in that outer frame. So this outer frame of white, again, helps draw your eye into the final page. So I didn't want anything to go off the top. So again, we're going to cut this one down to 11 3/4. All right, then once we get that cut, we can go ahead and lay that one down. And then we'll see how this one really starts to come to life. Adding this fourth pattern paper. All right, we want just a narrow gap. If you look at our final example here, there's just a really thin gap with that background yellow showing through. So we're going to leave just that narrow gap and then adhere that all the way down. So see how much fun our backdrop is becoming? So these 4 pattern papers, we really set up what's going to be the perfect backdrop as we complete our page. So just don't be afraid. Just keep layering different pattern papers until you see what works. So yellow and blue definitely complement each other. If you had some colors that are harder to complement, the best thing to do is to use a stripe on the page and then pull out colors from that stripe. So it's exactly what I've done here. So I pulled out that navy blue. We pulled out that really bold yellow. And then you'll see as we start to put our die cuts together, I also brought in the orange, some of the greens. I did avoid the pinks just in case. I know my boys always wore pink when they were young, but I know some people want to be tried and true and wouldn't want a boy page to have pink on it. So I avoided the accents in the pink, but I used all of our inspiration here from that stripe. All right, now we're going to cut our photo mats. Now, usually this is a step, unless you have your photos ready to go, you're going to skip for later. You could go ahead and get all of your pieces in place, and then in the end, come back and add your photos. I'm going to go ahead and cut those photo mats, and I'm going to follow this exact way that we have done it here. Now, you can get all of the photos for both sides of the page. So if we're looking at our handout for both sides, you can get all of these photo mats out of one sheet of black cardstock. Make sure it's 12 by 12. You're going to know if the only reason it makes a difference is if you have a cutter like mine. If it's 6 1/4 it won't exactly fit and it ends up poking a hole. So again, I always like to start with a 12 by 12. No matter what I am doing with that solid paper, I always cut it down. So we start with the 12 by 12. All right, so for the first set of measurements, all of these measurements are written in your instructions, but I'm just going to show you the order of how to cut them if you want it exact to mine. So the first cut I'm going to make is 3 3/4. So when we put our paper onto a cutting board, no matter what kind you are using, if you're using the one that has the arm that swings out, Creative Memories, whatever brand that you are using, we always want to make sure that whatever measurement that we are going for, that we see that it's on the exact measurement at the top and we see that it's on the exact measurement at the bottom. That way we know our paper is straight. All right, so that was 3 3/4. And then I'm going to turn that. So I've got that same piece. I'm just turning it 90 degrees there. I'm cutting another 3 3/4. Then I'm going to cut 5 1/4. And from this little leftover piece, I am going to cut 2 3/4 by 2 3/4. So there are our first set of mats here. All right, we're going to just keep going. So the next strip I'm going to cut is 4 1/4. Don't worry if I'm going too fast. Obviously, I've already done this before, so it's going to be easier for me to do. Just pause it, make the cut, and then play it again. That way you can stay on track with me as well. And all these measurements, as I said, are written in your instructions. I'm just giving you the template of what order to cut them in to make sure that you can get both sets of pages, photo mats cut out on just one sheet. All right, so this one I'm going to cut at 4 1/4. So we have our 4 1/4 strip. I'm going to turn it that 90 degrees, cut 6 1/4. And then this way I'm going to cut down to 3 1/4. And now we have just one more to cut. And that last one is 3 1/4 by 3 1/4. All right, so now we have all of the mats cut for the entire spread. For now, we're only going to adhere this larger one here because of course we are working with so many layers. So we have to work at the base layer first and then kind of work our way up. So I'm just going to adhere this larger photo mat here. Again, you're welcome to skip this step. You'll be able to kind of tuck a photo mat however you wish later, but I'm going to go ahead and adhere that larger photo mat. All right, it's pretty close to the edge that would align with our lighter yellow here. So that's going to leave just like 1/4 inch border of the yellow showing on the left. And it's down, I don't know if I had to guess, about 1 inch or so from the top. So we'll go ahead and lay that photo mat down like so. So the other 2 photo mats for this page will actually go on our cake overlay. So the next step, what we're going to do here is you have in your packet this large birthday cake shape. So we're going to have fun decorating a cake. I always wished I was one of those people, even though I'm really creative, I'm not very talented like at icing a cake or painting or anything like that. Try as I may, and it's probably the perfectionist in me that, is being prohibitive to keep going on with that. But this is going to be our way of being able to decorate a cake. So in your packet again, you have this white cake, and we're going to go ahead and adhere it onto the page. So it is quite a large die cut, so it will take quite a bit of space on your page, but you will see that there are all kinds of different ways that we can add photos and work our way around it that we could still get a lot on that page. All right. So we're going to hear it down in the lower right there, about like so. It doesn't have to be exact, but if you look, if you want to line it up exactly, there's just that little piece of blue showing on the right of that middle layer. So if you look here, there's just a little, again, it doesn't have to be exact. I know sometimes in a class, it's nice not to have to think, you're just doing. So I give you everything in exact, but know that I would never be offended if you're going to do it a little different. All right, so here we have our cake is now ready to go. We're ready to decorate our cake. So we are going to start with adding some of the icing that goes onto this cake. So in your bag, you have 2 sets of die cuts. We have all of the die cuts for this page in a baggie, and then all of the die cuts for the next page in their own baggie. For now, let's go ahead and peel out the icing here. So there's 3 layers to our icing. I'm going to seal that back up so that I don't lose anything. But then we're going to go ahead and start icing our cake. So if you are an inker, this is where the inking comes in. So of course, the trick to inking is always to go about 2 shades darker than the color of the cardstock. So if you look at the Mango Mai Tai ink pad, compare that to my colored cardstock, you'll notice that the ink pad is just a little bit darker. And we do that because it's a chalking ink, which means as it dries, it's going to dry a little softer. Now I go direct. I take my ink pad and I use it direct onto my die cut. If you are a little hesitant to do that, it takes a little bit more finesse when you're doing it that way. You're welcome to use a dauber. Daubers are way more forgiving. So what you would do is take your dauber, pat it on. I think I had one right here. I do. So there's all sorts of daubers out there in the world. It doesn't matter which one is your preference, but you would, take your dauber, really load it up in ink, and then go on the outer edge of your piece there. And it's more forgiving than direct, because direct, the ink pad can be really wet. So if you're new to inking, or maybe if you feel like you haven't got down the finesse it needs, I would start with a dauber first, make sure you're really comfortable with that. And then, in time, then you can go direct onto your die cut. So you're going to hold it just at a little bit of an angle. And I'm literally going to go on the right, all the way across the top, and then on the left. Like so. And again, don't worry too much if it looks dark or if you think you went in too far, because as it dries, it will definitely soften. And it looks pretty stark now, but it won't be that stark once it completely dries. Now you can use your dry adhesive here. I would only put adhesive along the very top, no matter which adhesive you're using. So just in case your photos are a little different, that way you can slip photos in at a later time. If you're doing it exact to the sample, of course, then you can go ahead and glue the entire piece down. All right, it'll wet some of that excess there. And we're going to add the orange icing to the top of our cake, like so. And then we're going to repeat this process with the yellow and with the teal. So with the yellow here, I have Desert Sun. There are so many yellows out there though. If you don't have the exact color that I have listed, you can go through your stash again. So we're going to see the color of the paper that we're inking, and just take it through your ink stash and see what would be about 2 shades darker. All right, and again, I only put adhesive right along the top because even if you're doing this exact to the sample, see how my photo mats go underneath part of that there? So I wanted to make sure that I was able to slip those photos underneath. All right, and we'll keep going here. So again, if you look here, this is our final icing. And then here is Dragonfly, which is about 2 shades darker than that teal icing. I'm going to go along the left, along the right, and then it's more of a continuous flow there down that straight line. Always start off really soft-handed because you can always go back and add more. If you don't feel you had enough pressure the first time, just keep adding until it gets exactly the shade that you're interested in. All right, we'll go ahead and adhere that bottom. Just like so. See how it's already coming to shape? I mean, just like piece by piece. It just gets more fun and more fun, right? All right, so now that we have all of our icing layers onto the cake, let's go ahead and add our journaling blocks up here. So in your packets, you have pre-printed little journals here. I liked leaving the black line because to me that helped differentiate since our cake was white. If you want it to look like it was printed directly onto the cake, you would cut just inside the black line. That way it would look like it was, directly printed on there. That's kind of whatever your preference is. You're welcome to do this with a paper trimmer. I am a fussy cut fanatic. So I love to fussy cut, but you are welcome because they are straight. You are welcome to use your paper trimmer and cut all of these pieces out. All right, again, I'm leaving the black line just because that's my personal preference. All right. You could also leave these off and then add your own journaling block. You don't have to type it. You could use your own handwriting. You could actually just flip these over. So what you could do is, let me cut this one and I'll show you. Go ahead and cut them all out. And if this wasn't the phrase that you wanted, once you had them all cut out, you could take those pieces and flip them over. And then you can handwrite your own journaling. So that way your basic design would be identical to mine, but that way you can personalize that and make that your own. So, the sky's the limit when it's come to creativity. This white cardstock is the classic collection from My Colors. It is an 80-pound stock. So because it is a heavier paper, when we run it through the printer, you don't see through, to the other side. You don't see that there's printing on that side, so that works well. If you don't like the exact phrase, when we have included journaling strips, you can convert it to whatever you want to be and still have it in the right or the exact color that it was meant to be in. All right. I'm actually going to use 3D foam to adhere each of those layers. Totally up to you if you don't like them quite as chunky. Let's see, don't put it there, you'll never see it. All right. So I have a big roll of this skinny lined foam, which is perfect, I think, for pieces like this. Because you know me, I like to make sure the entire piece is covered. Now that I have it stuck to everything. All right. And another reason I like this brand is because it's so easy to peel off that little edge there. It comes off so easy. All right, so this is our bottom one. This is the happy birthday to you. It doesn't, again, it doesn't have to be exact, but I actually wanted to go into the yellow layer like so. But the way it is, you could actually do another little journaling strip up here if you had something that was a little larger, or you could leave this just as it is. And because we have space up here, you could do the year or the date or, whatever you would like to put up there. All right, so the next one is, it's your birthday. The day is here. All right, and we're going to get another piece of our lined, like so, and add that down the center of our journaling block. Peel off that backing, easy peasy. And I'm going to adhere that just above our first one. All right, 2 more to go here. This one is just a little bit shorter, so it won't need as much. All right, you might notice too the difference in where I am right now when I typically instruct on a virtual class. So this is my office, and this is where I do all the Friday lives when we do a live broadcast on social media. But our office is under construction. So part of the construction, they had to cut off our storage section of the property. So we had to take all of that storage and cram it into our already pretty small office. So the area that I record classes typically is completely full of storage. It'll be nice when all of it's done though. All right, so there we go. There's all of our journaling blocks. All right, so let's go ahead now and let's do the word happy. Okay, so let's go ahead and put all together the layers of happy, because again, we're working in layers and we want to adhere the bottom up. And see how this balloon is kind of intertwined with that happy? We need the balloon adhered before we add our photo mat. So let's go ahead and put together happy. So there are 3 layers for each letter. I'm going to pull all of those out. All right, so let's go ahead and add all 3 layers. Let's move, for now, let's move this up a little bit higher so you can make sure you can see what I'm working on. And let's go ahead and adhere all those layers. So the adhesive I'm using, I use wet adhesive for smaller pieces and then the dry adhesive for larger pieces. So my liquid choice here is the Barely Art Precision Glue. I know a lot of people like the Art Glitter Glue. It's just kind of whatever your preference is. All right, so we got all 3 of those layers. We'll just keep going along here with the other 2. All right, so I want to know who's going to be on your happy birthday spread. And I also want to know if you celebrated your birthday. Are there people who think to take pictures of you as you're celebrating too? So obviously, if you're going out celebrating with a fellow scrapbooker, they're going to remember to make sure they take pictures of you for your birthday. But does your family remember to do that too? I always say it's so important that you are a part of your album. It's not braggart. You are not boasting. We know most of us don't like our photo taken, but it's so important for future generations to see their ancestors and what life was like. Because think of like your grandparents and how different their life was, probably how different they celebrated birthdays, or maybe they celebrated the same way. Maybe you have traditions that have gone through generation to generation for birthdays. Again, it would just be a fun a fun way to document that. So don't forget to also include your celebrations as well. I know when I turned 50, so that was just a couple years ago, if I wanted a 50th party, I was going to have to plan it myself. So I'm all for it. I wanted to be with my family. I wanted to be with my kids. So I planned the party. And luckily, a couple of my kids are super good at taking photos. They're very thoughtful that way. So even though I had to coordinate my own birthday party, my heart was totally happy and full in the end because I was able to spend an entire weekend with all the people I love the most. Sometimes you just have to take the bull by the horns, right? If you know you want something specific, just hoping and praying that someone will read your mind and do what you need them to do, oftentimes can end in hurt. So don't be shy. Again, don't be shy. You want to be happy, right? Plan your own birthday party. All right, so now that all of those are all together, let's go ahead and move our original back here so that you can see. Now, if you see here, our balloon does intertwine. So I am going to go ahead and lay all of these down. But when I go to adhere the Y, I'm going to make sure that that side will pop up so that I can stick the balloon underneath later. All right, so we're going to start with the H. These are pretty big letters, so I'm going to do my dry adhesive. I think it just lays a lot better. Liquid adhesive on big pieces can warp. So anytime that I can use the bigger adhesive, a dry adhesive, I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right, these letters will definitely overlap. So in order to fit, they will definitely overlap. If you're worried about if you're getting them close enough, lay it out first, then go back and adhere. Lay it out and then go back. Since I have the ability to cheat here with our original sample intact, I'm just going to adhere as we go. Not going to totally push down. I know there should be just a little bit of a space because we want to add those candles, and I'm unsure of the exact amount. So I did put it down, but I didn't push it down. That way, if I need to pick them up and move them, I still have that ability. All right, just one more letter here. Oh, and it worked out perfectly. Don't you love it when that happens? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and push those down. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to then start working on my balloons. So I'm going to pull out the navy balloon first. So let's pull out the pieces for that navy balloon. There are 3 pieces that make up the balloon. I did ink that top blue layer. So the blue layer is what's on top, and I used deep sea. So again, if you're looking at the piece and looking at the ink, see how the ink is about 2 shades darker. So again, if you don't have deep sea, go through your stash, use your die cut as a guide, and pick one that's 2 shades darker. All right, easy as that. Now I'm going to adhere those layers together. Back to my liquid glue here. Adhere that to the red layer. Also, don't forget, so before I lay this down, we also have swatch books for my colors cardstock. So say you really like that shade of blue and you're thinking, I would love to have a few more shades of that because I would actually prefer my photo mats to be in that blue instead of black. So that way you could take your, take your swatch book here and you can just align to see which one works. So now we can see that that is the blueberry from that classic collection. So swatch books come in real handy because everybody's monitor is a bit different, right? So we can't tell exact shades of pieces. And my colors cardstock is always true to color. So perfect use for the swatch book. All right, when we go to adhere this down, don't forget we want to loop-de-loo it through the Y. So I'm going to run my adhesive here just a tiny, tiny bit on the tail. Whoops. We'll lift up that Y. Here we go. Perfect. Again, step by step, this really comes to life, doesn't it? All right, so now we are ready to go ahead and add these two photo mats. So with our little leftover piece, I did forget to cut two of the mats. I've had forgetting to write those in our notes, but you should still have a piece left over from when we cut all of the photo mats to begin with. So we're going to use this piece here, and we actually need to cut a 3 1/4 by 3 1/4, and then a 2 3/4 by 2 3/4. So we're going to take our piece 3 1/4 by 3 1/4, and we're going to use that piece on the right page. So I'm going to stack all those photo mats up. And then we're going to cut this one 2 3/4 by 2 3/4. All right, so now we have our two mats for our, that will go on that middle tier of our cake. So that's what I was saying. In case you wanted to slip those photos underneath, you want to make sure that that's not completely adhered all the way to the end. So I'm going to take my adhesive on the two photo mats, and then just a few more pieces to go. But you also see what I mean by so many pieces in the kits? You can easily stretch them out if you want to make sure you have more space for photos. All right. So those are our two middle tier ones there. Let's go ahead and do the two balloons that are down in the lower left corner. So if we go back to our bag, in that baggie, we have the orange and yellow balloon. And then we also have the green balloon. We'll leave everything else in there for now. All right, so with the orange balloon, I did ink the edges of that as well. So we're going to take our mango Mai Tai. And my mango Mai Tai is on its last leg. So I'm going to be really heavy-handed with this because I want to make sure that you see it. Now, we want to do it before we adhere it to our yellow layer, because if we waited and then tried to ink only the edges, chances are you're going to get the ink inside the polka dots, and we want those polka dots to be pretty crisp. So make sure when you're inking that outer edge of the orange that you're inking it before it's adhered to the next piece. So there we go. I'm going to add my adhesive. Put those two layers together. And then we're going to go ahead and adhere that to the black string there. And then it will be ready to adhere to the page. Perfect. All right, I'm going to use my gun here on that big piece. I'm personally not going to worry about the tail. You can add adhesive there. It is going to be in a protective covering. Alrighty. And then we have our green balloon. So the green is going with palm tree. Don't forget the rule of thumb. Put our cardstock here, our cardstock piece, show it around to the various inks that we have. Pick one that's 2 shades darker. So for this would be palm tree. Weeping willow, just as a side note, is a good sub for palm tree. If you don't have palm tree, weeping willow is pretty close to working the same. All right. Adhere those 2 layers together, and I'm not using pop dots for these. You are absolutely welcome to. We have a little bulk down here because there are so many die cuts. So I didn't add any to the balloons. All right, just like so. All right, so now I'm going to add this icing piece down here. You know how when they do the decorative border kind of along the tiers, that's what this reminded me of. It's just a series of circles that have been welded together. But to me, it really showed, that technique in cake decorating when they use the little balls and go all the way around. All right, so let's then go ahead and do our candles. And then we are almost done with the left side of the spread. All right, and pull out all of the little pieces here for the candles. Don't forget the flame. It's always the little kids' favorite part, right, of the cake, is blowing out the candles. All righty here, let's look. Oh, I forgot the yellow flame. All right, so we're gonna move this up just a hair. We are going to do this red, yellow, orange one first. So we have our flame. And of course, we're going to use Desert Sun on our flame. I'm going pretty heavy-handed to make sure that we see that pop of yellow. Now, this is totally personal preference. On the sample here, I did use the 3D dots underneath the flame. So if you like to add that bulkiness to your page, you're welcome to use the 3D dots underneath the flame portion. And then here, we're going to add that orange piece at the bottom. I am going to ink this, but I'm only going to ink the top of this one because that shadow would come from the flame. And if we ink too much, it's such a thin piece that if you ink all the way around, you're going to change the color of its entirety, right? Because it's such a thin piece. So I only inked at the top because we just wanted to give the illusion of a little bit of a shadow that the flame was casting. All right. Let's go ahead and add this one to the page. So this first candle, they're both going in between the A and the P in happy. So we're going to go a little more close to the A with this one. Oops. There we go. It's a little bulky down there, so I'm going to put some pressure on it just for a minute just to make sure it stays. Alrighty. For the next one here, you're not really going to see any of the edge of the teal portion of our candle. So I am not going to ink that piece at all because you wouldn't see it anyway. But for this greenish yellow, I'm going to do just a little bit of our palm tree. I'm going really, really dark, right? That's way more than 2 shades. but I'm pretty confident it's gonna work. All right, again, we're only doing just the top. It's a thin piece. If we ink the entire piece, we would totally lose the color that was cut out from. And we just want to give just that little bit of a highlight where it shows the flame would be casting kind of a shadow. All right, almost done. We're going to go ahead and add the yellow portion of our flame. Oops. How about if I put the adhesive on the correct side here? All right, I'm going to add just a little bit here of the mango mai tai. Just to add just a little bit of dimension. Not too much though, because again, it's a pretty small piece. All right, perfect. All right, then let's go ahead and adhere that one. All right, so now we have those two candles in between the word happy. Something really fun, if you're always looking for kind of an interesting way to do a title, you could do the candles as the sticks of the P. So those would be really cute, right? Or you can do as many candles as you need to. Say it's a 5th birthday party, add 5. Now, if it's 75, it might be a little difficult. But we could then take the candles and put them more towards the top of the cake if you wanted. And then you could do like a 1 and a 0 and put a flame on those numbers, and it would look like, the candles that you get that are numbers. So it would kind of give that illusion as well. So the sky's the limit, remember? Just because I have done it a certain way doesn't mean you have to. All right, our very last piece, we have our birthday banner. So we have the happy, and now we're going to finish it with birthday. So we have all of the white letters that comprise birthday. All right, so we're just going to glue those one by one. This would also be a great time if you've seen my technique before, where I take my liquid adhesive and I pour a little bit out like on a piece of paper, and then I just dip the letters in. That saves so much time than adding adhesive to a tiny piece one by one by one. So if you know that you're going to be adhering several little pieces, I would make that little puddle of glue. That way you can just dab your die cuts into that little puddle. The only thing you have to remember is it's going to dry really fast, so you don't want to squeeze out too much because you don't want to waste it. So you can always add more, right? But that's a great time saver. I'm going to do it this way. Hopefully we can give you some time to get caught up as I'm gluing them one by one. Have you ever done this and then afterwards learned that you spelled something wrong? In my older age, I seem to do it all the time. I need someone that continually walks around me and spell checks everything I do. Now, I kind of have that because my assistant here in the office is really good at that. She's really good at making sure they're caught before they go out the door, because I always say to the team, it's not a mistake until it leaves this building. So they're so good at catching each other's human aspects, and not in a judgment way, not in a judgmental way. But my spelling has become atrocious. All right. All right, so I did use 3D foam here on that banner. Again, that's totally up to you. That does give quite a bit of bulk to the bottom of the page. Total personal preference. I'm going to go ahead and glue these direct. Get it in its spot. Add some pressure here. Whew. We did it. We completed the first page of our spread. So before we move on to page 2, take just a few seconds here to admire your work. There's a lot of pieces on this page, but I also wanted to show you here the difference in that same cake overlay, but it gives it a completely different feel depending on what pattern papers you add to it. So if I pull over a couple extra samples here, so look at this one here of my little sweet pea, my little Dallas. So with this, I took the white cake pattern and I traced it onto cream. That way I still had my original, use that as a pattern, and then that way I could cut it out of different colors. It's a pretty basic shape that doesn't require a lot of fussy cutting. They're pretty straight edges, so even if you don't like fussy cutting, this is kind of an easier one to do it with. But look at the difference here. I just wanted the cream because of the cream in her bow was better than the white. So this is the exact same birthday cake here as this one, but look at the difference. So here what I was talking about with the number candles. So she was celebrating one, but it could be any numbers here, right? And they don't have to go at the top of the cake. It's okay that they're here in this middle tier. But again, just look at the dramatic difference in that exact overlay. I also wanted to show you here. So remember what I was saying here, I left the black lines because I liked the juxtaposition there of being able to see that stark line all the way across. If you wanted to make it look like your journaling was printed directly onto that cake, it's exactly what I did here. So I printed out my journaling on the computer, and then when I cut this journaling block out, I cut just inside the black line, so there was no black line. So when you're just looking at this, it looks like that journaling was printed right in that middle tier. But see here, still 3 photos. We have 3 photos here. We have 3 photos here. This sample, though, gives you a little more wiggle room on getting a little bit bigger of the photos. Here I wanted to show you, I'm using it for something totally different. So here is that same cake that we used for our birthday, but here I have used it for wedding. There's so many different opportunities to use a cake. Any kind of celebration you can think of, it works, right? But instead of doing the bright colors, I went with their wedding colors. And just accented the 2 top layers. And then I added an overlay, a mandala overlay to kind of frame around the edge of our cake. And again, look here, we have 1, 2, 3 photos, 1, 2, 3 photos. So even though it's a really large die cut, you can definitely get at least 3 photos using that large cake overlay. All right, moving on to our right side of our spread to complete our happy birthday 2 pages. All right, so just as usual, I'm going to leave my sample beside us here as we work along on this left side here. That way you can see where all of these layers are going as we assemble them. This first 5 steps here, we are going to lay out our background that's going to serve as the base for all of our die cuts and our photos. So we're going to start with that 12 by 12 striped paper. So what I need you to do is go ahead and cut off that barcode strip. Don't forget, if you like this paper, you'll want to save that barcode strip. That way you can remember which collection pack that it came from. We do offer this Echo Park birthday collection pack again. So if you wanted to stretch it out and make several more pages, we do carry that pattern paper pack for that reason. All right, so make sure that your stripes are going horizontal. We don't want the vertical stripes, so just remember that as you're adhering your pieces. Also in your bag, you have another sheet of white cardstock. So see how I needed to break up the busyness of that stripe. So I really wanted our stripe to be only along the edge. So you could have done this in the reverse. You could have used white as your background and then cut, half an inch or 3/4 of an inch, whatever your preference is, of the striped paper and adhere that onto the white. So that's totally up to you if you want to do it in the reverse, because I needed the white to kind of break it up in the middle. So you could again use the white as your base. Identical to this, cut 2 1/2-inch strips from the striped paper and then glue those thin strips along the left and the right sides of the white. You can do it that way. That's not how the sample is done, and that's not how the instructions are done. So I'm going to do it according to the instructions. And I just wanted to show you that because if you do it that way, you have a large section of this striped paper left over in case, again, you need to stretch it to make it more pages than 2. So just think about that as you're putting this together. But we're going to go ahead and cut our white cardstock. We're going to cut it down to 11 inches. 11 inches, just like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to adhere it directly there in the center of our striped paper, just like that. Now you will notice that there are really, really thin strips of this lighter teal cardstock, and we're going to just accent that edge with these pieces. So what I do in that instance is I'm going to flip this over. I'm not going to run my adhesive all the way to the edge. That way I can slip those little pieces underneath. I'm going to start in just a little bit further here. I'm going to adhere it in the center of our page. I'm just eyeballing it here. All right, it was already down. It's not centered. Get over the perfection, Andrea, right? Didn't we say that earlier? It does not have to be perfect. All right, and then I wanted to really kind of set off that border, so make it just kind of a little extra oomph there. So I'm going to take these thin strips of Seafoam My Colors cardstock, and then this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to slip it just underneath, barely pushing down the one side. Does that make sense? That makes it so much easier than trying to put the strips down first. All right, so I'm going to do it again here with the other piece. Run my adhesive down it. I'm going to turn it over to its side. Slip that underneath. That's why we want to make sure we don't go all the way to the edge with our adhesive of the white, or we wouldn't be able to slip this underneath. All right, perfect. And see what a difference that makes? Just adding just that little bit of pop. I mean, it's just what, 1/8 of an inch strip, but it really makes a difference and it really emphasizes that white. Again, the goal is to draw our eye in to the page and into the photos. So the stripes are telling us to go in, right? This is all telling us to go in to the page, to be looking for all of the special little goodiness that we're going to add now. All right, so in your packets, you also have a piece of red. Isn't this so pretty? It really reminds me of kind of a retro diner, right? It looks, for 1950s-ish with that shape of the star. I absolutely adore it. So you have this piece of red pattern paper. We need to trim it down to 11.5 inches. 11.5 inches. So we're cutting off that 1/2 inch piece there. I'm going to put that aside. And then we're going to go ahead and adhere it in the center of our page, just like so. All right. So again, I'm going to run my adhesive. I'm going to run out too before we end up finishing. All right, and then I'm going to adhere it just in the center of the white. Again, just eyeballing it there. All right, so then after the red piece, you also have this yellow piece of the shooting star pattern paper. So if you remember, we used this as the background of our first piece. So I wanted to tie that in over here as well. So you do have a piece of this yellow shooting star. We're going to cut it down to 6.5 inches. 6.5 inches. And then we have our crown pattern paper, and we're going to adhere it in the center. So we do realize that in this instance, your shooting stars are going vertically instead of horizontally, but we're going to cover up the majority of it. So we just wanted to make sure we can maximize the use of the paper. So once we get those two photo mats together, you can hardly tell the exact flow of that original yellow, that base layer. But we're going to, and this was already cut. Remember, we cut this when we were putting together the left side of the spread. So we are going to run our adhesive, and then we're going to attach the lighter yellow in the center of that darker yellow. And the reason why we're adding this piece, if you look at our final design here, by putting that yellow, look how we really draw attention to that balloon cluster. Because when I had the balloons directly onto the red, it was so hard to see. Even when one of these balloons was a different color, it's still, the busyness of that paper was really hard to see that cluster of balloons. And look how it really brightens it by adding just those little pieces of patterned paper. All right, so then we're going to go ahead and add this here about like so. Again, I'm just going to eyeball it here. All right, so here's the backdrop all ready for all of our die cuts and all of our photo mats. So the next thing I am going to do is I'm going to go ahead and adhere the photo mats. This one, of course, you could hold off, and this you could all easily lay down. And then you'll have plenty of space on both sides of all of that die cuts that you can personalize the size of those photos however you need. All right, so I'm going to lay these out first just to make sure I get them in the right spots. There's our 3.5 photo, 3.5 by 5 photo, our 3 by 3 photo. Let's go this way. There we go, our 3 by 3 photo. All right, just like so. I was just making sure that they are going to fit before I go ahead and adhere them down. I'm going to put these pretty snug together because I like being able to see that pop of red at the top and a little bit of pop at the bottom. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and glue these photo mats down. Ooh, it's going to run out in a minute. All right. There's for our largest photo. One of our 3 by 3 photos. While I'm thinking about it, you know, this strip here, when we cut the 6.5 inches, you have a piece left over. We're not going to use it for any reason, so I'm going to totally set it aside. But again, it's great if you need to make extra pieces, extra pages, that you can use all of those extra pieces because they all coordinate. There's so many pieces in our kits. Ask the production team, they'll tell you. I get the old stink eye every once in a while when design is pretty complex. Uh, did you really just say that? Did you just say, do you have a design that isn't complex? You know me well, right? All right, our final map here. All right. So look how many photos we're going to actually get on this page. So to me, really the key is if you want to get a ton of photos on a spread is you're going to have to cut some of them down. So the joy of that, right, is we have the digital age of photos. So you can snap 15 of the same exact position on your cell phone. So you're going to zoom in, you're going to zoom out, you're going to put them onto the left, you're going to put them onto the right. That way, if you need to cut those a little bit down, you're kind of creating a waste on the photo when you're taking the photo. So think about that as you're taking your photos. You know, it's those of us who were back in the days of film, you really only took one, right? Because you could get 24 or 36 photos on a reel, and then you had to go turn it in. And when we first did that, it was a couple of weeks before it would come back to us and we could see the results. But it was pricey, right? So we took one shot, or we might have took two shots. Nowadays, you can just shoot, 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 shoot. The ones you decide you don't want, you can just throw away later because you're only going to print what you need, right? So when you are taking your birthday photos, make sure that your guest of honor, you have them in the center close up. You have them in the center and you're really backed away. And then I want you to put them to the left of the photo, then put them to the right of the photo. Again, that way if we need to cut some down, you kind of have some excess space that you are able to work with and you're not cutting off anything important. Just, you know, kind of the excess space that you have created. All right, the next thing we're going to do here are our balloons. So I'm going to pull out that balloon bouquet. Just like our little cherry tried to run away. All right, I'm going to set that to the side a little bit so I can put this in the middle so you can watch me as I go. All right, so when it comes to inking, these are supposed to be, you know, like when the light hits a balloon and it causes that little bit of a glare. That's what this is meant to be. So I don't want to ink the glares at all. I'm going to leave them really stark. So we're going to set those aside. Don't ink those. But I am going to ink the balloons themselves. Now, you know what I was saying, how you take your die cut, and if you don't have the exact color that I say, go through your stash and see if you can match it with what you do have. So in this instance, I used Bloody Mary. If you don't have Bloody Mary, one of the newer ones, this was new last year, we have Manzanita. Manzanita is so close to Bloody Mary. They're virtually interchangeable. So use what you have, or of course buy more, right? All right, I am going to ink just down the left side there, like so. And then we have our green balloon. Got some palm tree for that one. And because it's in the middle, getting squished by these two balloons here, I'm going to go ahead and ink that entire base like it's doing, you know, getting a shadow from both of the balloons that are on either side of it. All right, our final one here is the orange. And then, of course, we're doing the mango Mai Tai on the orange. Fall leaves is also a good one for this. All right, so we're going to go ahead and adhere our balloons to the black vase. And for now, I'm just going to adhere the balloons, and then we'll go back and add that little glare piece. Add our red one here. And then our green one in the middle. I love primary colors. You notice how I always have a pop of black. So hopefully, with this virtual event, not only do we have this class instruction, go back and look at all the 8 challenges that we're doing throughout the day also. There's so many great techniques. One is using that cake as a unique way on a page. One is using pops of black with pastels. So make sure you're also not only watching this video, you're going back though and watching all 8 of those little mini instruction videos. All right, I really liked the look of having our little glare pieces here popped off the balloon. So I'm going to add my 3D foam here to each of our little glare pieces. I don't do anything without my tweezers. I don't know how anybody picks up any little piece without tweezers. And I have to use the reverse too, which is kind of funny, right? They're really counterintuitive, but way easier for me. All right, peel off those backings there. So we have our orange. This is also when that swatch books come in handy. If you wanted to do this technique on your own, you were cutting your own balloons, trying to figure out, what colors you should order. We put those swatch books together in about Roy G. Biv order, so that way, like all the blues are together, all the greens are together. So it's great to see all those hues and how well they complement each other. All right, so there is our completed balloons. And we're going to go ahead and adhere those to our page. I'm just barely going to go down the strings. All right, perfect. All right, so let's take out our phrase here. Hip, hip, hooray, it's your birthday. It's your birthday. It's your birthday. Do you remember what that's from? Was it one of the Dr. Doolittles? I think it was a Dr. Doolittle. All right. We push this up here. I don't want to lose the dot of that eye. I am so infamous for losing the dots of the eyes. And if you traveled to our office before, you know that we have multicolored rugs. I mean, there's every shade imaginable on our rugs. So if something gets dropped to the floor, it's gone forever. I have to recut. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and glue these 2 base layers together here. And again, it's bringing in that pop of black. Even though we're working with primary colors, I love the pop of black. Really accentuates that. And then when we go to adhere our phrase on, it almost gives the illusion that it's been cut out of the yellow because of how we have layered them together. So it kind of tricks your eye a little bit. So it's fun to do that where you have your word in black. You have a little bit of a shadow in a different color, and then create another shadow in black. So see here, so it looks like the base layer and the hooray are the same thing, and we've cut that out of the yellow. It's way easier this way though. All right. We've got our hip here. Like so. One less here, and then we'll add the dots to our eyes. If you're like me and you tend to lose the dots of the eyes, never fear. You could use an enamel dot is just perfect for this. You could take a black marker, make your own little dot of the eye. Again, as your audience is flipping through your album, they're not looking for those minuscule details. No one will ever know but you. All right, but I do happen to have both dots in my eyes here. So we finish out that hip hip hooray. All right, we're gonna save that little border of stars to last. So now I'm gonna put this together. So this is an instance where we have cut out and not giving you individual letters. So we try to do that as often as we can, because we never want you to be without a letter, right? It's hard to spell birth without without the R. So by doing it this way, we ensure that you get all of the pieces. Sometimes though, I like the dimension of having the letters on top. But for this instance, I thought this was a perfect way to, do individual letters that were connected, but we've done it so that it's three pieces and not all these individual letters. If you attend our cozy crop-taculars, so we're not able to offer it during our large crop-taculars, but during our cozy crop-taculars, I can give you a little mini class on how to do that exact step. So if you would like to learn, make sure that you're signed up for one of our cozies. And I can give just a one-on-one lesson. If that helps you, or if there are a few that are interested, we can do that together. All right. And our last piece here, I think since I'm about to run out, I'm going to use my liquid. And then you'll see how it all comes together on that last layer. See, that's so much easier, right, than having to glue all of those individual letters and making sure they're straight and not crooked and the right amount of space in between them. So much easier. All right, so now we're going to add that to the base of our title here. All right, and now we have our border of stars. All right, I am going to use a little bit of chalking ink on the green ones, and then I'm going to use pop dots to adhere those. So this is when that corner piece of the ink pad really comes in handy, because see, we're going to get into the star here, and it's a great way to get onto, each of those little legs of the star by using that corner there of our ink pad. And that way we can get just the edges and we're not going too far in. So I am going to do that with all four stars here, these two being connected. All right, and then one little last one. We're going to be super gentle with this one because it's so tiny. We do want to make sure that we see the original green of the cardstock still. All right, perfection. And then I am going to, as I said, use some 3D pop dots to adhere those. I'm going to get a micro mini for that tiny one here. There we go. Peel off that little edge. All right, so these are pretty big, so we'll use the bigger pop dots for these. And again, this is personal preference. You absolutely could adhere them flush. If you don't use a lot of chunky stuff in your album, obviously you're going to be able to get more pages in. I just can't resist all of the dimension, though, that pop dots bring. All right, we just have the one big one left. Let's pull out a few more pop dots here. See if I can squeeze in another one. I like it to lay, perfectly flat, so I like to use just as many as I can. All right. All right, then once we get all of those on, we can add that to our title here, and it's all complete. So look how relatively simple that was to assemble, but it really makes a big impact, right? Isn't that so fun? So fun. All right, let's see if my tape runner is going to make it. No. So we're going to cheat. Do something I typically don't like to do. We're going to use liquid adhesive on that big piece there. All right, so we're going to situate that. If you don't have your photo mats, it's okay. We're going to use kind of our balloons as the guide to adhere that portion of the title. So the only thing we have left on this page is an adorable little cupcake at the bottom. So it has a ton of layers. Again, kind of how we did here. How crazy would it be to try to cut all of these little sprinkles and give you little individual sprinkles in your kit? You would be frustrated. The team would be frustrated, right? So we've done it in a way that we have multicolored sprinkles by using the negative space. So it's way easier. So we have the white as the base, then we have our green layer, and then we have our bright blue layer, then our teal or our seafoam layer, and next we have the red layer. And you notice I haven't inked anything yet because these are all underneath layers. So none of these will you see. We're only using them so that we could have multicolored sprinkles. And then we have our yellow, which is at the top there. So I am going to go ahead, use my Desert Sun, and ink that top yellow layer. We'll add that. See how fun that is? It is a little bit chunky because of all the layers, right? But way easier than trying to cut and utilize all individual sprinkles. All right, if you want to, you're welcome to use 3D pop dots on our little cherry here. And then we'll add that to our page and we are done. All right, so I'm going to put it a little bit to the left because we're pretty heavy on the right side up here. So we'll add the weight so that it's, you know, a little bit of a diagonal with the weight of things. So we'll put that down there at the bottom. All right, to all. Both pages completely done. So now that we have both of these together, let's take a peek at them side by side, and then I'm going to show you how to take those 2 pages and turn it into 4. All right, so that is our completed spread. So if you were doing it identical to what the kit was showing you, this is how your 2-page spread would turn out. Gorgeous, right? It's so fun. The thought process has already been taken care of, and you can use this just how it is. However, if you purchase the kit and the coordinating cardstock pack, and that coordinating cardstock pack gives you 5 sheets of solid cardstock. So here is spread number 1. So I've used the 2 white pieces for our background. Remember, we had a 12 by 12 piece of the shooting stars. I've used it in a way that I've put it on both the left and the right so that it has that continuous flow and really makes this really a continuous kind of design. From our coordinating cardstock pack, we have that seafoam, so I use that as a mat for that piece. And then, of course, we had an entire sheet of the stripes, so we were welcome to cut that up however we wish. This here is the 1-inch strip from our kit. And notice all I took from the die cuts are the happy birthday and the balloons. So if you look here, all I have taken from this page is our happy birthday and 2 of our balloons. So we still have oodles of die cuts left, but look how glorious this is. So not only did I use the black for the mats, again, I used the coordinating cardstock pack. So I took the red and the blue from that pack and I made additional photo mats, and see how really clean and streamlined the design is. And we still have oodles of pieces left over. So with all of those extra pieces, here is spread number 2. All right, so for the second one here, this is where I kind of put the bulk of all of the rest of those die cut pieces. So we have our cake, but we wanted to get more photos on the page. So I took that cake and I spread it down the middle so that it's part on the left and part on the right. And we had all of those pieces of pattern paper. So what I did was cut those pattern papers to fit each tier of the cake. Look how fun that cake is by adding those pattern papers into our tiers. So we have all 3 of those came out of the original kit. So then I've taken that red piece of pattern paper that we had, I cut it in half, and we've made our border strip along the bottom. Again, that makes your flow all the way across. And then we have kind of a little groupings of all of the remaining die cuts. So look at how beautiful and clean we have taken a single kit, its coordinating cardstock pack, and gotten 2 pages and 2 more pages. And then, of course, to compare, here is our original. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you've learned a few things, and I hope you have your spread all complete and ready to add your photos. Make sure you show me what your photos look like on our new design. All right, thanks for tuning in. Happy scrapping.